I speak a lot about Jewish history on this show. Why? Because the story of the Jewish people on planet Earth is an ongoing one. And if you don't approach modern Jewish experience as but a single point on a centuries-old continuum, you're simply not going to understand what's going on today. You have no frame of reference. You're like a child who wanders into the middle of a movie. You're out of your element, Donnie. And even those of us who think we know Jewish history forget how many instances of the same old anti-Jew hatred there have been across the globe, across societies, across the ages. So today, I'm going to give you a quick historical rundown of the most common anti-Jewish ideas and actions that have infected humanity throughout time. And I say quick because if I touched on every single example, we'd be here for eternity. I want to start with the OG, an event that wrote the playbook for all other Jew haters to follow for millennia to come. I'm talking, of course, about the world's first pogrom in Alexandria, Egypt in 38 CE. Destruction of synagogues by the local population at the behest of the ruling government? Check. The singling out of Jews alone as aliens and foreigners, despite the majority population being themselves imperial conquerors? Check. The dragging of Jews from all corners of the city into one small area, leaving their homes and belongings to be plundered by bloodthirsty, Jew-hungry mobs? Check. Thousands of Jews murdered in broad daylight by their neighbors, including the burning of entire families in their homes? Check. Jews stoned to death, beaten to death, crucified? Check, check, check. But equally important to grasp here are the anti-Jewish ideas, the foundational lies and twisted justifications for violence, which have never changed. According to the Egyptian orator Apion, who argued his case against the Jews before the Emperor Caligula in Rome, the Jews were trying to seize power, and from the Greeks, who were their clear racial superiors. The Jews were also engaged in strange demonic religious rituals, including the occasional cannibalism. And there we have four fundamental pillars of anti-Jew bigotry established thousands of years ago. Jews are a nefarious collective attempting to dominate society. Jews are biologically and racially inferior to whomever is the majority group. The Jewish religion is strange and evil, and Jews engage in monstrous, inhuman, ritualized blood sport. Anywhere you find Jew hatred, you find these four lies propping it up. Let's skip ahead a little to 313 CE, the Edict of Milan. Remember that from history class? Roman Emperor Constantine makes Christianity the official religion of the realm. Jews become widely discriminated against and isolated from society via legislative and legal means. The total dehumanization of Jews as a matter of official state policy. This practice will repeat itself again and again over the centuries, all the way through the Holocaust. Next, we come to the Middle Ages, a time so shitty they're known as being the ages between other ages. We've all heard of the Crusades, right? Officially the Christian war to claim the Holy Land, aka Israel, from the Muslims. But might as well kill some Jews while we're at it, right? Jews are massacred by the thousands, forced to convert or die, then expelled entirely from both England and France. 3 times, actually. Merci beaucoup. And once again, we establish several classic anti-Jewish ideas as justification for anti-Jewish violence that are all still very much in use today. The first is blood libel, a term I've discussed on here before, which basically means a false claim of demonic Jewish ritual killing of Christians and grotesque things like drinking their blood or using it to make matzah. We heard our boy Apion pop off about this back in the day, but it really took hold in 1171, when the Jews of Blois, France, were accused of crucifying a Christian child during Passover and throwing the corpse into the Loire, leading to 30 Jews being burned at the stake. Pretty blah, if you ask me. The second is religious hostility based on the notion that Jews killed Jesus, something someone on Instagram literally charged me with last week. Never mind that Jesus and all his disciples were Jews or that the Romans were in charge. Historical facts be damned. The third is money. Christian doctrine forbade the charging of interest on loans, so Jews, who were also banned from many other jobs, were the de facto moneylenders of the day, beginning the inversion of resentment over Jewish success into claims of Jews being money-hungry, avaricious, and cheats. This arrangement meant that non-Jews would often find themselves in debt to Jews, including the monarchs of England, France, and Spain, who all found it much easier to mass murder or expel Jews and seize their wealth rather than pay back their debts. The fourth is scapegoating. As European nations suffered from famine, military losses, even the bubonic plague, guess whose fault it was? Much easier to blame the tiny minority who can't possibly fight back than assume responsibility for your own poor governance or bad fortune. You've all heard 1492 Columbus sailed the ocean blue, right? How about in 1492, Spain said, get the fuck out if you're a Jew? Jews had helped Ferdinand and Isabella finance their war against the Moors, but now that the war was done, so were the Jews. How's that for allyship? Let's take on a trip to Germany, where Martin Luther, founder of his own branch of Protestantism, wrote a book called The Jews and Their Lies, describing Jews as a plague, pestilence, pure misfortune, and suggesting their synagogues and homes be burnt to the ground, their assets and sacred texts be seized, and their freedom of movement revoked. Cool guy. Italy saw its fair share of attacks on Jews via expulsions, ghettoization, and the burning of holy scriptures from Rome to Venice to Milan. The 17th century Cossack uprising, aimed at liberating Ukraine from Polish rule, somehow made Jews the primary victim, with 100,000 of them massacred in a single year. Even America got in on the fun. In 1862, the great liberator Ulysses S. Grant expelled Jews from southern states because of their involvement in the black market for cotton, which, of course, both the North and South heavily relied upon throughout the Civil War. But hey, if you can blame everything on the Jews, you just have to do it. In France, we witnessed the 1894 Dreyfus Affair, where Captain Alfred Dreyfus, the only Jewish high officer on general staff, was accused of being a spy based on forged evidence and despite knowledge of the actual non-Jewish culprit. It was this injustice that pushed Theodor Herzl, the father of Zionism, to conclude that if even a high officer was not immune from the anti-Jew bigotry of the majority, no one ever would be, and so began his pursuit of Jewish self-determination. In Russia, a falsified document called the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion claimed to reveal a secret society of Jews who meant to conquer the world with the slyness of the serpent. Its widespread acceptance jump-started 20 years of deadly Russian pogroms and laid the foundation for today's ubiquitous conspiracy theories of Jews colluding to control the world. And of course, we have the Holocaust, which was, need I remind you, only 80 years ago. You think 40,000 people killed over 500 days during a modern urban war started by terrorists who hide under civilians is a genocide? During the Holocaust, over 300,000 Jews were murdered in under a year, just in Romania. Most of us probably don't even know where Romania is on the map. The question that naturally arises is why? Why the Jews? There must be some reason everyone hates them, right? Sure, there's a reason. It's because we're Jews. We're the teeny tiny minority who refuse to abandon our identity and our souls to please our masters. We celebrate life despite the constant presence of death. We succeed and contribute to society despite discrimination and oppression, and we continue to persevere against all odds. Qualities that arouse jealousy, bitterness, and self-loathing in those who fear the other. This basic animal fear is a very powerful social mobilizer for governments with agendas they need the populace to support. And to see that idea in action, look no further than the Palestinians. From Yasser Arafat to Yahya Sinwar, Palestinian leaders have become literal billionaires by stealing international aid intended for the masses, lining their own pockets rather than investing in the development of their people. And while Palestinian parents are focused on training their children to use machine guns to murder Jews, they're healthily distracted from the massive fraud being perpetrated against them by their own leaders who don't even live there. Friends, we must reframe the way we think and talk about Jews today. For any concept of modern Jewish experience that does not account for our history of systemic persecution in every society we've ever lived in is a sham. It is not enough to just connect to the Holocaust, as if that was the first and only time Jews were ever murdered for being Jews. Do you realize how radical the notion of never again is, when from the dawn of time, the mass murder of Jews has been always again? And the persecution did not stop on VE Day. From the expulsions or deaths of nearly every MENA Jew in the Arab world, to the discrimination and suppression of Soviet Jewry in the 80s, to the mass shootings of Jews across America in the 2010s, to the Hamas atrocities of October 7th that found support around the globe, the targeting of Jews is still happening. The continuum is continuing. Do not let yourself be gaslit into believing otherwise. There are only two things standing between us and further annihilation: the state of Israel and diasporic Jewish solidarity. That is it. If we each do everything we can to support those two things, maybe at last we can change the Jewish story. Maybe at last, when we say never again, it'll finally be true.